Now, I'm really thankful that you have shown interest in the government procurement. Uh, in fact, government alone cannot get into this journey of e-governance unless the private sector is completely on board and completely in alignment with their vision of digital India. So I also understand that, okay, if you are attending, then probably you would have some expectations at the end of the session. Uh, the objective with which I am presenting uh, this session today is basically to make you understand what are the government procurement rules which are applicable while uh, procuring the IT goods and services. How should we work with the buyers to improve the quality of the tender documents? Because many times when you are bidding for the government tenders, you end up with situations which is not conducive for your organization, as well as it may not be fair and transparent. So at least you should be aware about your rights and the government of India policies on what the concerned ministry and the department should be following while doing the procurement. This will also help you to address any or bring up any questions at the pre-bidding stage so that the concerned department and the ministry can take corrective actions. Lastly, I also want to make sure that in this exercise you are also able to appreciate the changes which have gone into GFR 2017. As all of you may be aware, the General Financial Rules 2017 is the updated version of the earlier General Financial Rules 2005, where there were some issues and an updated version of this has come. In between, there was an effort from the central government to bring in the Procurement Act. In fact, a bill was introduced, but somehow that was done in the previous government, and it did not get passed, so it's lying in the limbo, and it has expired now. So with this, we'll get into the presentation. Now, the key question is why we are making so much of a fuss about the government procurement. Government procurement, I mean, we all go and buy anything, and is it that tough for us to buy anything? For example, if you have to buy a computer for yourself, probably you could go out and choose the best, and by the end of the day, you will pay and you'll get the delivery and it will be installed at your place. But if the government has to buy and if it has to follow the process, then probably this may take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, depending upon the complexity and the paperwork which is required in the organization. The ability of the organization and the maturity of the organization to handle the procurement, IT procurement, is also important for the organization to do this procurement. Now, the key thing which is there in IT procurement is there are lots of technological challenge. There are lots of different solutions which are available in the market, and it's quite often not possible for you to compare two different products and services. Now, when all this is put into paper, then it becomes all the more complicated. Whereas it is expected that they will be comparing and giving everybody a fair chance. There will be transparent and objective process. So how will they go about doing this is a challenge for them. I'll also like to highlight from our experience what have been the various challenges which the industry has been facing with the government procurement in the vis-a-vis the various terms and conditions in the RFP. I will not like to go into each and every part, but prima facie there has been one major concern, which is in terms of the payment terms. The payment terms in the government is a challenge where, if I remember correctly, at some point of time, NASSCOM had given a number of 5,000 crores of the industry is stuck with the government. Now, that's a big number, and because of that reason, it is suspected that quite a few IT companies decided not to pursue further in the government, any opportunities in the government. Lot of them, in fact, most of them became very conservative while bidding for the government procurement. Now, we need to understand this and be more pragmatic. While government is definitely responsible in bringing about the right terms and conditions. As bidders also, probably we need to be a much more mature while bidding. Many times we bid just in the expectation that we have to beat the competition, while that may not be the best thing for our organization. So we have to understand that once we have bid in the government, then government is bound by certain rules and processes. So anything getting changed at a later date may not be possible. So it's important for us to understand the terms and conditions on which the payment is being made. If it is unreasonable, I think it is very important that it should be highlighted at the bidding stage itself. If the agency or the ministry and the department want to change us, fine. Otherwise, as an organization, you should be free to take a call whether we want to bid or we don't want to bid. And many times we have seen that the government and the departments, they have really invited the industry, sat down with them, made the changes with which they were comfortable. In fact, the government and the industry both needs to be comfortable before the tender processes move forward. So that's a relative point which I want to talk about. In fact, if you remember, there was at some point of time the exchange rate issues did come up, wherein quite a few tenders, the system integrator had to face adverse financial implications because of the rate and the exchange rate variations. And promptly, the government of India did come up with the guidelines to the departments and the ministries to factor in the exchange rates. Incidentally, we have factored that also in our model RFP, which is hosted on the METI website. This exercise, which has been done by the Ministry of Electronics and IT, is the one in which there was significant amount of interaction with various industries, different companies. There were the best practices which were taken from various sources, from the World Bank, the general financial rules. Then the PPP in India, Ministry of Finance, also hosts a model RFP, which is in the infrastructure side. So we took a lot of precedences from that side so that it can be easily convinced to the government departments and the ministries so that they can factor it in this model RFP. One thing which we are talking about is mostly from the side of the industry, but it's important to know from the government side also there are certain apprehensions which they take care while doing the procurement process. So they are facing issues on 3-4 areas, which is the e-government projects are not taking off. So how should they be structuring the project that there is a light at the end of the tunnel? The implementation agency should not be leaving the projects in between, and there should not be any non-compliance to the existing rules, specifically pertaining to the standards. With security gaining much more importance, and you would have, I'm sure, read newspaper articles on the security aspects of Aadhaar, wherein NIC has been on the wrong side, and that has been talked about. While they may not be completely, at fault, this issue is going to come up very seriously in the future bids. Now, this session today I would like to categorize under 7 heads. So the first one will talk about what is the procurement procedure which the ministry and the departments have to follow. The second is the evaluation methodology. What typically, if it is a 2-stage bid, in fact, it can be multiple types of bids, but if a government is following 2-stage bid, there will be one for the eligibility, which we call pre-qualification, and the second one will be the technical evaluation. The third part which we want to put up is the scope of work. Now, scope of work definition is very important from the government side. And many times, if it is not very clear, we end up having bids which are, there's a huge amount of mismatch between the expectation and what is being supplied. So we'll spend some time on that front as well. Then we'll talk about the bid participation terms, which are there in the tenders. we'll spend some time on the payment models which have been proposed in the model RFP. Then commercial bid evaluation and the legal and contract terms. So these are 7 areas where we will be talking today. So let's go to the first one, which is procurement process. Now, the procurement process the government can follow is a single. It's a single stage tender. There can be 2-stage tender. Then there can be a EOI. Then you would have heard the name, request for empanelment. Then there is a single source. So there are various types of procurement which the government people can do. But typically there is some thought behind it that what they will be doing. And in fact, the document which we have posted there talks about the various types of procurement which has to be used at various situations. So for example, if the procurement is very much standardized and productized, there is not much of a requirement for us to do a EOI and then the RFP. We can directly go for the RFP. Earlier in the GFR 2005, they had mandatorily made it that everything which is above 25 lakhs needs to follow 2-stage process, which in the new GFR they have withdrawn. So at this stage, they have the flexibility of directly getting into the RFP without going to the EOI. EOI is generally used where there is a broad understanding about the requirement of the work to be done by the bidder, but still there is some amount of uncertainty involved. So they want to do, whenever there is a requirement of industry consultation in finalizing the scope of work and finalizing the tender, it is better for the government organizations to do an EOI first and then move to the RFP stage. The third one, which is the request for empanelment, which is RFE, it's something which is done selectively by various organizations where they empanel a particular types of suppliers. For example, NIXI had suppliers empanel where they decide the amount and the rates upfront, and they can get the work at a very short notice. For example, if any product is on NIXI empanelment rate, the concerned department in the ministry just needs to issue a letter and transfer money to NIXI, and the order will be placed. So this helps them to completely avoid doing the procurement process, because NIXI would have done the entire procurement process for them. Now, with the latest GFR, where it is talking about government e-marketplace, the GEM as we call it, under this, all the products and the services are supposed to be empaneled, and these will be available on online. So the whatever was being done by NIXI earlier will get subsumed in the GEM portal. The last one is the nomination process, where the government people are not too much inclined towards going there, because it puts them under, the concerned officer has to be really sticking his neck out for giving a work to someone. However, the general financial rules do allow it under certain circumstances pertaining to where the choices for the bidding officer, the procurement officer, are limited. So these are the prima facie the top ones which is there as an option for the government departments to do the procurement. We talked about the GEM. Now, under the GEM also, they have given the option, or rather stages. So if it is any amount which is, any procurement less than 50,000, one can directly, just like, we procure through the Flipkart, we can go to the e-marketplace and place an order, and we'll get it. If it is between, 50,000 to 30 lakhs, then they have to compare it amongst 3 different products, and the lowest one they can place the order. And if it is through above 30 lakhs, then the GFR mandates that you should be doing a reverse online auction for the bidders, so that they can get the minimum or the lowest price. So these are some of the development which has happened, and the GEM portal as a supplier, I'm sure you being a product or a software company can register yourself on their website. At this stage, probably all the products and the services have not been empaneled, but this is in process, and sooner than later this will be completed. One of the advantages of being empaneled is, while you can sell your product, the other part is you will be exempted from providing the earnest money deposit, which is for each and every tender, as per the GFR, one has to give any amount between 2% to 5% of the total contract value as EMD till the bid process is over. So with this, we'll move to the next item, which is evaluation methodology. And we are specifically talking about the eligibility. Now, it's important that when you get a tender, then you should be in a position to look at it and probably make sense out of it. Is it skewed towards any agency? The tender has to be a objective one, and it has to encourage competition. So in case if it is tilted towards anyone, probably this is the slide where we can talk about, for you to find out whether it is tilted towards someone, and you need to escalate it or bring it to the notice of the procurement officer, because many times in real situations, procurement officer may not directly have made the RFP. He may have taken help from one of the bidders to make it, and who may have skewed it. So if you highlight it, chances are the procurement officer will understand it and make the corrective actions. We have tried and standardized most of the requirements there, so that if you look at it and if you refer the model RFP to the procurement officer, he will definitely look at it with all the seriousness. So earlier there were cases where the turnover requirement was one of the restrictive criteria which was introduced. Then there were certifications which were limited to a particular OEM, which were being used to restrict competition. So these are some of the areas where one needs to really look at it. The net worth, turnover requirements are important criteria as far as the government is concerned, because they want to check out the financial strength of the company before they give the work order, specifically where it involves significant amount of upfront investment to be made by them. So it's something which is important, but anything which is restricting competition has to be done away with. One important thing which is there, which is important for all of you to know, is earlier there were a blacklisting clause where they used to ask for a self-certification that the bidders should not have been blacklisted all across any parts of the government. Now that was a pretty open-ended thing, because blacklisting as a process in the government did not exist as a standard process. There were a few examples where a blacklisting did exist, but it was not in IT field. It was with PWDs, where they had a very defined process of blacklisting. But many times we had seen that there were government departments who had blacklisted the bidders on the basis of non-performance. Now, non-performance has to be dealt with as per the contract, and blacklisting is not allowed as per the new GFR. It very clearly talks about that blacklisting has to be on the matter of integrity and corruption. So if the blacklisting, or in fact it does not use the word blacklisting, it talks about debarment. So and the responsibility of maintaining the list centrally has been given to the DGSND, which is supposed to maintain the list, and if for the reasons of integrity or corruption, if any player has been debarred, then it can be to a maximum of 3 years. Even the individual departments can also debar, but that will be for the procurement in their particular department. But the maximum amount of period it can be debarred is only 2 years. So this is a change which probably we will need your help also to highlight it to the procuring agencies, because many times the procuring agencies just use the prior tender template and run with it. and you will still have the blacklisting clause inserted there. So you will have to highlight that it is not as per the latest GFR, and you need to make the corrections. One important thing which I want to point out at this stage is what we are talking about is largely on the central government procurement. All the state government will have their own processes of procurement, wherein there will be some nuances, but the basic underlying principles of procurement will remain the same. The second part which I want to put is the technical evaluation process. Now, technical evaluation process in the earlier GFR, things were at a gray level where one could, tweak the understanding to make sure that the goods and services procurement can also be done through QCBS. In the latest GFR, they have categorically divided into three parts. One is the consulting, the other is goods, and the third one is the services. So currently the QCBS, which is cost cum quality based selection, that is allowed only in consulting, and that too the maximum of 80% weightage has been given for quality. Rest for the goods and the services, it very clearly talks about that it should be L1 procurement. While it is there, and we can debate and discuss about the merits of it, because quite a few times the level of intellectual or innovation requirement in the IT projects is huge, and probably it should be, if you ask me personally, I would have advocated QCBS for them as well. But since this GFR 2017 is overarching procurement manual and it applies for everything, it does not allow for a QCBS for the IT's goods and services. In this also we have tried and done we have got the subjectivity removed and got it very objective manner on how the technical evaluation should be conducted. Largely it is divided into the three sections. One is about the past credentials of the company. The second one is the approach and methodology, where your solution architecture as well as the detailed BOM comes in. And the third one is talking about the type of people or the CVs of the people who would be working on the project. So fundamentally, these are the three types of evaluation which is done by the government departments and the ministries. There are fundamentally two types of RFPs. One where they would be leaving the solution part to the bidders, and the other one is where it is a very standardized, productized type of a procurement, where the amount of innovation or any intellectual thought is restricted. So in the first type, generally the credentials carry much more marks. For example, if you have done any IT project, let's say GST implementation in 10 states, then you get so much marks and so on. Now that is something which is there for a particular type of a product which has become quite standardized. But if it is something innovative, which is maybe integration of GIS and drones into a solution, then it will be tilted more towards the solution aspect. So the government and the ministries do take some thought, or they spend some time in understanding what is the nature of the RFP, whether it is a productized one or it is where you have to give your intellectual inputs. So if it is on intellectual inputs, the marks on the A&M and the CVs will be much higher than the credentials. And if it is a productized one, then the marks on the credentials, etc., will be much higher than the CVs and the A&M. So with this, I'll come to the third part. I think we are doing good on time.
Sure.
So I'll try and move a bit faster. The third one is the scope of work. Now, this is one place where all of us need to be very, very, careful about. Many times you will see the RFP, which are pretty much open-ended, and it leaves to the bidder that they have to assume or make certain assumptions. Incidentally, the government is also not willing to take your assumptions into cognizance while signing the contract. So in this particular stage, you have to make sure that you have the right amount of information for you to factor in your cost. Else, it will be something which is, again, there will be a mismatch between what you are bidding for and what you will end up doing. For example, if it is, the number of records which have to be digitized. Now, somebody may give, okay, and we have seen all these bids. So, if somebody says, okay, it will last 10 years records have to be digitized. Now, last 10 years record being digitized does not give you enough information for you to price it. So you need to have the information about, okay, if it has to be digitized, then there are multiple questions probably you need to ask and get clarity on. For example, if it has to be digitized, then how many pages is it? What size of the pages is it there? Is it all A4? Is it two-sided or it is one-sided? Is it supposed to be, data entry also need to be done? If data entry has to be done, then is it to be done at the site of, at the multiple sites, or it has to be done centrally where all the records will be brought in by the buyer to a central place, and so on. Who will do the QC? Who will sign off the digitized data? All these are pertinent questions. Whether one will be using two screens to capture data or a single screen. Now, once you have all this information, the ability for you to price the solution or your solution will be much more better than if somebody just says that you should be digitizing 10 years of records. So what we have done in the model RFP is given templates for each type of work, and you should spend time whenever possible to go through it and understand what is the information which is required for you to size it properly. If not, then you are well within your rights to go back and ask the buyer or the government department to give you that information. Else it will be a harakiri for you to go and bid for such tenders which have very unlimited scope of work. Now, the second thing is the SLAs. Now, SLAs, somewhere when the government works, the SLA seems and SLAs are something which can be an open-ended thing. Many times, in fact, I know at least 2-3 instances where the penalties on SLAs were beyond the value of the contract itself. Now, one needs to be really careful about when one is signing up for the SLAs, because it is at the bidding stage only when the government has the flexibility of changing the SLAs. Once it is signed, then the process of changing the SLAs is probably the same as changing any product or any service requirement. So it's important for you to understand the SLAs. I personally have been trying to make it in such a manner where SLAs are limited to the industry, which is generally it is 10% of the contract value. We also have been able to put it in the model RFP that it should be 10% of your quarterly payment wherever quarterly payments are to be paid, so that the amount of risk exposure is reduced significantly. So you'll have to really push the buyer to agree and appreciate that the risk cannot be open-ended. SLAs generally should be very minimal, and it should be core to the business outcomes. If it is not, then generally more the SLAs, it means more the risk, more things you have to, effort you have to put in managing the contract. So these SLAs, you should be looking at it carefully. May not be any change which you require, you should push at this stage and not at a later stage. Last but not the least, you should not sign up for unlimited value of penalties. The third thing within the scope of work is the deliverables part. Now, the deliverables at the end, once you have done and completed the project just before the go live, possibly, most of the times that is the stage where the government departments have most amount of resistance to sign off. Now, this is a challenge, and many times, and I go back again to my scope of work definition. Many times, the scope of work will say, okay, you have to get all the sign off from government regulatory bodies. At that point of time, if one is not really careful, if one has to get a right of way. Now, government is the best agency to actually get you the right of way. If you go and request for right of way, probably you will be getting it in months, if not years. So the RFP, when we are designing the deliverables, we have to look at the deliverables which are within your control. Any risk has to be borne by the party which is best suited to bear that risk. If it is, if you are taking the risk which is best handled by the buyer, then you are taking up something where you don't know whether you will be able to get to your end outcome, or you will be getting a sign off on your deliverable, because people do change in the government, and at the end, if he is involved, somebody may come and mention that, okay, I have done this for you, so why should we be paying you? So one needs to be clear about all these parts before we sign up. Okay, so now let's move to the fourth item, which is the bid participating terms. Now, in the bid participating terms, there are, I'll take a few of them. I'll not take a comprehensive list, and I'll probably take it during the questions. Hopefully, we'll have time towards the end. You have to look at various bid participating terms. Some of it are rigid. Most of them are something which can be done away with. Some time back, people were coming with even a specified power of attorney format. It wasn't prescribed at any place, but that's what they insisted on. Now, it took some time for us to convince them that the power of attorney at most of these big companies is to be signed by the board, and the board is not available to sit on every day. So you have to accept it in whatever format it is allocated, as long as it is authorizing the signatory to commit on behalf of the company. So that has been accepted, and so on. So there are lots of bid participating terms which are there. Most of it can be tweaked and can be made something which is easy for you to bid. So please question it. Please ask the buyer to give you if there are any instances of a policy or a rule which is getting violated if it is tweaked. Now, of late, the MSME policy is also getting into the procurement process. So as per the MSME policy which was released, by 2018, all government departments have been told to procure at least 20% of their total procurement from the MSMEs. Now, out of that 20%, a separate 20% has been earmarked for the SC/ST owned MSME. In fact, while I'm saying MSME, it is actually micro and small. Medium is excluded. So it is. So these things are getting implemented. At this stage, it may not be very. I don't see tenders which are coming out which are enforcing this. But at some stage, this may come up, and I thought it would be worthwhile to talk about it here. So, now one other thing which was there, which is relevant here, is when in most of these we ask for that you should provide a client a work order from the client. Now, the companies which are working in the international, they sign NDAs, and quite often they are not in a situation to share the work order. Now, I think more and more government departments are appreciative of this fact, and more and more tenders you will see where they are okay to take a written statement from the authorized signatory and accept it. and obviously comes with some sort of a thread in which it says that if it is found out that it is not true, then whatever penal action they will take, they will take. So which I think is a good development, and it helps the companies to get in good solutions or innovative solutions which were already done in some part of the world, that can be easily replicated here. So with this, I will come to the payment model. Now, payment model in most of the tenders is largely two types. One is, or rather, I would put it three types. One is you pay the product, it delivers, and you get your payment. The second is for the system integrator types, where there are certain milestones basis which you get your payment. Now, these milestones subsume or assume that those particular deliverables and commissioning would have happened for them to release the payment. And the third type of a payment model is transaction based. I'm not purposefully putting a PPP model while it is there on the slide. It is actually transaction based payment and not PPP, because PPP means generally that one should be sharing risk, and in most of the tenders the risk sharing is not appropriate. So transaction based pricing in India has not been really taken off, and largely because of various reasons, and we are all aware. I mean, CSCs was one of them where failure happened. Now, unlike a private sector, whenever there is a transaction based pricing, there is a commitment of the minimum volume of transactions. In India, and within the government, while I have personally discussed, debated it with various government, but they have been really very cautious or hesitant about guaranteeing a particular transactions, and it works both ways. So at one side there is if the transactions are below a particular value, the SI gets hit, and if it is on the higher side, the SI makes money. But very rarely we have seen the second option. It is generally the first option where we have been struggling with. While we get into the transaction prices, it comes with a huge amount of risk, and of late we have not been too enthusiastic about transaction based pricing. I think we require a lot more maturity from both sides, from the bidder side as well as from the government side, before the transaction based pricing can become popular, as they are there in the most of these BPOs and the business process outsourcing centers. So this is on the payment modes and the models which are there. One more thing which I want to discuss is there is a provision in the GFR where actually one can go and ask for advance payment up till 30% for the private industry on submission of a bank guarantee. Now, this is something which is there in the GFR. It's not put in the RFPs, but wherever required, I think that's one area where the industry can start making that request. And since it is there in the rules, I'm sure, especially when March 31st comes, you will end up getting much more enthusiastic clients who will be happy to accede to your request. Now, commercial bid evaluation. Now, on this front, there are largely of late the GFR, while it says it has to be L1, outside the government there have been various bids where, especially if it is a international funded project. So if it is an international funded project, the procurement rules of the funding organizations apply. So in that case, it can be a QCBS, it can be a single source, it can be a QBS. So in that case, all those options get opened. But if it is funded by Government of India, then it will not happen. So this is one thing which I thought may be relevant for you to understand. uh, the tax, any tax which is there has to be borne by the government. I think that's one area where the industry needs to really push it forward. It has been put in the model RFP as well. Any variations in the taxation structure has to be on the account of the government. Now, there is another clause which is, causing a lot of uncomfort, which is the most favored purchaser clause, where it's also called the, fall clause, which means that if you have provided any product or service to any government, then you will not be charging anything higher than what higher to the new client. Now, that undertaking has to be given. While, and we had a lot of debate and discussion while forming the model RFP, that why should we need this, because this is in IT, it's not very relevant. I think they have understood it, but finally the decision was taken that, okay, rather than saying that, okay, we delete this, we put it most, the prices should be under similar circumstances was the word which was added. And no two tenders can work at under similar circumstances. The basic minimum will be the time itself. So it will be a different time, it can be different SLAs, it can be different payment models and so on. So for all practical purposes, this fall clause is being made redundant, but nevertheless it is there as of now. Now, the last one is the, if there are any legal team members, I think that's the major area where they spend their time on. So in a government procurement, there are lots of issues pertaining to the ownership of the deliverables, pertaining to the IPR, sharing of the source code. Now, we have made it clear that whenever any work is starting, then the intellectual property rights remain with the respective parties before the start of the engagement. Anything new which is getting developed, the client can have the right of having that IPR. So that's my understanding is that is okay with most of the industry people. The arbitration clauses is something which again you need to look at it. It should be following the Arbitration Act, Arbitration and Reconciliation Act 1995, if I remember correctly, wherein a process has been laid down. So it should not be a one-sided arbitration where the head of the client organization does the arbitration. Many times the bid document does not talk about the liability. So the default assumption in most of our companies is that the liability is unlimited. Now, the GFR says that there cannot be an open-ended liability. Now, if GFR is saying, then you have to quote that GFR and ask them that are you, deviating from the GFR. Most often than not, I have got a favorable response. So please use that GFR clause to make sure that the liabilities of your organizations are not unlimited. There are quite a few other things there, but I would rather stop here, and there are last 14 minutes which I would rather keep it open for the questions. Okay, last slide I'll take one, which is the changes in the GFR. So there are 8 changes which I want to talk about. The first one is now the GFR talks about the mandatory use of GeM portal, which is a very radical change which has been talked about. In fact, one of the important thing to be noticed is right now the government has gone to the extent of saying, or rather not saying, that you should publish the advertisements in the newspaper. So earlier, in the earlier GFR, it was made clear that you need to publish the RFP notice for RFP in 2 national dailies and so on in one vernacular language. But right now, it's not a mandatory requirement. If it is published in GeM, it meets their purpose. The second is I talked about the revision of the financial limits for various purchasing methods. The third also I did talk about, which is the introduction of clause from debarment for bidding. There is a code of integrity guidelines which have been introduced right now. Then there is a special provision for startup and MSMEs we talked about. The fifth item, I know there is a numbering challenge here, but the fifth item which is there, which gives that that you are not required mandatorily to submit a EMD while bidding. So you can submit a declaration and the EMD can be waived off. So that's one thing which can impact the procurement. And these can be done by online methods. Right now, it was especially if it is in hard cash, then it can be done online. Then there is a separate section for consulting as well as non-consulting services. So that delineation has happened. And there have been some changes for the consulting organizations where quality and cost-based selection, they have given various options for QCBS. So these are the key changes which have happened. Okay. So the first question which I have is, will we get the presentation to download? The answer is yes. I'll have to request Vibhor to do it.
Yeah, we'll do it.
The voice is breaking, so I don't know when we got that question. Is the voice clear right now? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's clear. It was in the beginning, it was some notices I got, I responded to those.
Okay. So the fifth one, we would like to know about the Swiss challenge. Now, a good question. Swiss challenge is a method which is not put here right now. Many of the state governments have gone into and have formed policies around the Swiss challenge. Andhra Pradesh, for one, I'm aware of, where they have a Swiss challenge wherein the bidder or the client identifies a solution and it is put in the public domain with a price to say that if the bidder can match or lower the price, the original exponent of the solution has the right of first refusal. So that's the procurement model which is there. But right now it is not under the GFR. But the state government are using it, some of them, and they have a very clear-cut policy on the same.
It is like a rate contract.
No, it's not a rate contract. Swiss challenge is okay. You have this mobile with so many features. It comes with price 50,000. Now, can you give me the same product for less than 50,000? Now, this is a Swiss challenge. Then the next question is, as per the rules, EMD is based on project value. Can department ask EMD on annual project value instead of complete 5 years project value? Yes, this request we have been getting from many times, but unfortunately the GFR is very clear that it says the contract value. So even if the client is willing to do it, it generally does not happen. Now, can a tender have a provision to award additional work more than 70%? There is a policy which restricts it to 20%. Having said that, once the contract is signed, there is a compulsion from both sides that you have to make it work. And many times we have these instances where the additional work has been more than 70% or even 100% at times. So there is no provision, but these are awarded after taking due approvals and at the client side and their own hierarchy. So it is a considered decision which is flagged to the committee, the HOD of that department, and they do it. But as per the policy, it shouldn't be more than 20%. Then there is a question on, can you elaborate special provision for startups? Yes, there has been a provision for the startups, and if I remember correctly, it has been the past experience has been done away with for the startups. But they have put something which makes the procuring officer stick his neck out and it says that he should assure himself that the final solution will meet the requirement. So while it is there in the government process, I think there something more needs to be done before the startups can start working in this area. I also know that the Prime Minister had met 100 startups, and he is trying to put the departments and the startups together in trying to disintermediate the government procurement process. Let's hope that there is something else will come out of that interaction. And I know that at least one or two places this is moving forward. We would also like to know strategic sourcing. I don't think so. The word strategic sourcing has been defined in the GFR. It is the single source has been single source procurement is what has been talked about, which is sort of a resolution to the strategic sourcing. So whenever there is, let's say, only a single supplier exists. For example, let's say it's a Microsoft Office, and somebody wants to procure a Microsoft Office, then there is no point in doing a tender. You can, and I know that people have still gone and bypassed that requirement by asking bids from 3 different dealers to submit and then selecting the Microsoft Office. But largely, it says that okay, you can buy only if if there is only one supplier, you can go and buy. The second is if there is you have a stack where only a particular solution or the license can fit in, then you don't have any option but to buy from that particular OEM. So in those places, the single sourcing has been allowed, and it is a part of the GFR. Yes, does the model RFP include delays from government? Yes, that's a good one. In fact, that's one of the, I had proposed that there should be an interest which should be paid by the government people in case the deliverables have been approved and there is a delay from 30 days onwards as per the contract. Interestingly, while there were many changes at the senior most level from the government, that 30 days became 15 days and became 60 days, and then it came back to the 30 days. So 30 days stays. The percentage, whatever in practical life I have seen, most of the places the client deletes that clause while moving forward, while it is there in the model RFP. So ideally, I don't think, it is fair for the bidders to ask if there are penalties on the side of the bidder. It is fair for them to even ask that there should be payment of interest in case there are delays in making the payment. Which question? Okay. We discussed this one. Okay. How to address third-party indemnity being sought from solution provider by government department to shield them from citizen and difficulties. How to address third-party indemnity being sought from solution provider? Sorry, where did it go? Sorry, just give me a second, guys.
Newer question coming up. So.
Okay. So I'm not able to look at the question, but if I remember correctly, it talked about the third-party indemnities to be given by the supplier. Now there is nothing from the government procurement policies which ask the procurement to seek similar indemnities. If it is being done, it is being done by on an initiative of the procuring officer, and it has to be dealt at that level. So there is no policy per se. So if any department is doing violation of rules in RFP, where to complain for a fair tendering? If it is violation of the rules, let's say if it is a GFR 2017, then one can complain it to the CVC. That is the place where most of the issues pertaining to the procurement are brought. If it is a central government body. So that's one place where you can go, and in fact CVC comes out with its various instructions and annual report where they cite various issues which were highlighted to them. So then there is a question, if we have NDA clause with the customer, would self-declaration explaining the kind of projects and order value would suffice? Would government reject the bid, or as the RFP asks PO copies? I answered this question, so I think this has to be reasoned out with the procuring department. If they are asking that you have to provide a PO, then there is no option. In many cases where we have seen that the local let's say any analytics experience in taxation domain in India. Now income tax was the first one which did that tender and of that scale. So they did allow that. So you have to reason it out that there are not much of a cases available in India, and on that basis they do allow. But that is clarified in the corrigendum or in the tender document finally. So in some RFP we see two security deposit, one in the form of EMD and the other form of PBG. Do we have any option of waiving security fees? Now these are two different ones, but the EMD is returned to the bidders once the successful bidder is identified, and the EMD of the successful bidder is returned once he submits the performance bank guarantee. So at any point of time it is only one. The EMD is generally 2 to 5% of the project value, and the performance bank guarantee, which is once the contract is signed with the or just prior to the signing of the contract with the successful bidder, it is 10% of the contract value. So performance bank guarantee is 10% and EMD is generally 2 to 5%. In fact, you can use that to estimate the value of the project in some range, or at least the budget which the people have. Then in this PPT, I haven't seen the finance department involvement due to major finance has to approve the budget. Yes, so I think I did talk about in one of the slides that when you are going when any RFP is published, the concerned procuring officer would have taken the approval from finance. If it has not taken, then at least you should budget 2 to 3 months after getting the successful bidder. That is the minimum time which will be taken for him to get the budget approved from finance, if it gets approved.
We have answered these 20% of the tenders.
Yeah.
We have answered.
Okay.
Well, this has been answered. No.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. So we have answered almost all the questions.
Okay.
Do you remember anything that we have not answered?
Let me just have a look.
Or we have almost got the time, so it's time to say bye.
Okay. I think that's the list of questions I have.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I have been successfully able to answer your question, but in case not, then please feel free to reach out to me. My number is provided my contact details are provided in the presentation. So